If this is true, it's crazy, as there have been some rumors that Kent Hughes might be the victim of mind games from New Columbus general manager Don Waddell. We have to get into this situation of what he said. Plus, the Habs may be drafting Saku Koivu's son, Aatos Koivu, and he had a very interesting quote. That, and finally, a note on Cayden Lindstrom and how Brendan Gallagher's father has a pretty interesting connection coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. And we're going to start with that. If you're more interested in some of the conspiracy theories around Don Waddell, skip ahead in the video. We'll have timestamps down below, but this Cayden Lindstrom thing is very interesting, Jesse. Now, of course, testing is underway at the draft combine. Cayden Lindstrom clocking in at 6'3", 213, which is quite sizable for a guy who's only about 18 years old. But there's a very interesting connection to the Habs, and it comes in the form of Brendan Gallagher's father, Ian Gallagher, who runs a camp, a training facility out in British Columbia. And he said in the 30 years he's been doing this, Cayden Lindstrom's a number one in a number of physical categories, including his power and his speed. And during the pandemic year, their NHL guys were back at the rink, and Cayden's lap speed at the age of 14 was comparable to what they were doing. He was doing beach runs with 10-year pros. This is some crazy stuff, Jesse. Now, I know there's still some concerns. There always will be with him, but to hear the Habs had dinner with him, to hear that connection with Ian Gallagher, and to hear some of the crazy physical things we're hearing from him, he might just be a unicorn. We talk about Slav being a unicorn. This is almost on another level.
This is getting me hyped now, right?
Oh,
because you got to feel one person in the world is a straight shooter. It's going to be Brendan Gallagher's dad, right? Ian Gallagher. And when he's telling you that Cayden Lindstrom is coming number one in speed and in power in his 30 years of doing this, training NHL players specifically, that is unreal. I was already hyped about this player. Now we're getting some of this background information. Unreal for obviously the physical capabilities that Cayden Lindstrom has, but also that there's already a connection to the Habs in a certain type of way that, not that he's completely familiar with the team, but it's a nice icebreaker, right? Obviously, and getting in good with Brendan Gallagher, one of the leaders of this team, I think would just be amazing just for his transition to this team, right? So, I mean, we're just hearing stuff all the day. Before, I was really big on Demidov. Now I'm starting to question, if both of these guys are available, who is really the best pick out of both of them? It's a tough call at the moment.
Yeah, it is. And, I feel like every day I kind of go back and forth a bit. And I see a lot of people in the comments going back and forth on this stuff. And I also want to just say, this is from Arpen Basu's recent article for The Athletic. I'll link that down below if you want to go have a read. There's a lot of great stuff in there as well. But yeah, Cayden Lindstrom versus Demidov, Jesse. I don't know. I think we'll know a bit more once we hear maybe some interviews and stuff with Demidov at the upcoming event in Florida for some other prospects in a few weeks. But this is just a kind of cool connection. And just one more thing that might endear Cayden Lindstrom to Habs fans. But when it comes to endearing yourself to Habs fans, there might not be a prospect in this whole draft, Jesse. While he might not be a first-round pick, there might not be any prospect who would be more endeared from day one than Aatos Koivu. Yes, that's right. That is Saku Koivu's son. He's a draft prospect this year, and he was asked some questions. Not only that, Jesse, I also wanted to mention, before we get into these quotes, he was up there in a lot of physical testing. He was performing very, very well today. But let's have a look at some quotes. Another Koivu is ready to enter the NHL. Aatos Koivu said during the season that his goal became to get drafted in the second round. He expects to go between the second and fourth rounds. Very realistic. I appreciate that. He looks forward to a few more seasons with TPS before making the jump, and of course, playing with TPS with their under 16 team, their under 18 team, their under 20 team, and even managing to play 4 games in the Liga as an undersized 17-year-old when he was about 100, and I think he was listed at one point, Jesse, at 5'9", 140, but he clocked in at the draft combine today at just over 6 feet, 6 feet half an inch, and 170 pounds. He's definitely growing, and he had an interesting quote that I wanted to share as well. And he said, pop it up, I hear nothing but good things about Montreal and the fans. And what better thing to hear? Saku is one of the most beloved figures in Habs history for a multitude of reasons. And I think it would just make perfect sense for the Habs, even if they have to reach around to reach. They've shown that they've been willing to do that for a guy like Florian Xhekaj, to pick him before he was mocked by pretty much everyone else. I think they might just do the same with Aatos.
Absolutely. And he's following right in the steps of his father, Saku, right? Who played for the same team. Everything else is his next team in the National Hockey League, the Montreal Canadiens, right? That's yet to be determined. I know a lot of Habs fans would be really happy about this. And the reason for that is because we know the Koivu family, just that character, that personality is world class. Now we're seeing from the combine, there's some really good natural abilities there. Aatos Koivu is a really good athlete and also a really good skater as well, which we know projects so well to today's NHL. And it's just some other interesting things that are coming out. Another Finnish player that he has a correlation to, and another Habs prospect on top of it that he's getting a lot of comparisons to is Oliver Kapanen. Similar numbers at, in his draft year. What a great prospect that Oliver Kapanen turned out to be for us, right? If we can get that caliber of player again, maybe in this third, maybe we try to go early in the second. I don't know. I'd say if we can get him in the third, this is an absolute steal, and I would be so happy with this pick for many reasons.
Honestly, I wouldn't even be upset. Like I said, the Habs just kind of crazy reach. Now, I don't think an end of first round pick would be what I would want, but I don't think there's going to be many teams looking for him, at least, in the second round. Who knows? Maybe Montreal can trade up for another second round pick and pick him early. Who knows? But I just know that I want Aatos Koivu in a Habs uniform because it just makes perfect sense. His drive to get better has been crazy. He's increased his size. Like he's gained some good weight during this season, played in the Liga, even though it was only 4 games at 17 years old while being undersized. I'm super excited about him. Like you said, world-class family. I would love to hear what you guys think about Aatos Koivu. I think he might be one of these guys. We talked about him a bit this season. Maybe, there were times, Jesse, I think, last year, thinking, will he even really get drafted? But again, he's bulked up a bit. He's played a bit better. Now he's mocked, maybe not in the second round. He wants to go between the second and fourth, but I would fully expect him to be a draft pick this year. Such an amazing curve for him. I would love to see him in a Habs jersey. Final thing, though. This is the thing we wanted to talk about today. Not that one, sorry. We got this. There's some interesting stuff going on, Jesse, with some of the management teams. Now, when you approach the draft and when you try to negotiate trades, when you kind of go on public shows and you say things in a specific way if you're a general manager because you don't want other teams to know what's going on behind the scenes, right? Well, there's been some interesting stuff going on with Don Waddell as of late. And if you guys know, Don Waddell was, of course, high up in the Carolina Hurricanes organization during the whole Sebastian Aho Jesperi Kotkaniemi fiasco. But recently, he's moved over to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And to give some context, a lot of mock drafts, not all, but a lot, have been mocking Columbus to take a defenseman because their defense, well, it was one of the worst in the league. It was really, really bad. That's a place that they really need some help. But Don Waddell goes there and he does an interview on the Jeff Merrick show, and he says, cleaning up your defensive zone is a lot easier to fix than trying to find pure goal scorers. I think that's where our focus should be off the start. So he's kind of going in. The first thing he's saying is, we want some goal scorers. And Jesse, well, we know that Montreal, they want to pick a goal scorer too. That's kind of their thing. And who picks right before Montreal? Well, it's Columbus. So is he playing some mind games? I think he might be, just because Marco D'Amico says this. It's French, but I'll translate it. He said, I just have a bit of a doubt when it comes to Waddell, and I don't think he would just give away his game plan as a veteran general manager like that. He said the last time he said something like that, the Hurricanes picked Noah Hanifin. I think this is a little bit of mind games, Jesse, trying to psych out Kent Hughes and the Habs, thinking that Columbus might pick a guy that the Habs want to take, whether it's a Lindstrom or a Demidov right ahead of them. What do you think about this? Do you think this was intentional? Because honestly, it wouldn't surprise me, and I could absolutely see this being intentional on his part. Maybe not directly towards the Habs, but to try and mess with some teams picking after Columbus.
I don't like the insinuations, though, and definitely the rivalry continues, the mind games continue. This is going a far ways back, right? It seems like there's still kind of some bad blood there. I don't think this is purely to spite the Montreal Canadiens because it's so blatantly obvious of what we need, right? But obviously, I think Don Waddell, at the end of the day, he's going to do what's best, for his team. We know that there's so much smoke screens kind of going on this time of year. Like, the last thing you want to do is really be giving your blueprint away. So I think we can't be reaching into that too much. They did draft Will Smith last year. You think they'd maybe want to take a little bit more of like a balanced approach of really getting like a stud defenseman, especially since there's so many great ones this year. This is probably what this Columbus Blue Jacket team needs the most, right? So you'd have to argue that's probably what would benefit them. But I mean, there is some really good players. Obviously you understand the appeal of a Lindstrom. You understand a Demidov, and many other years, Ivan Demidov would be going number 1 in this draft, hands down, right? So there's some really appealing players, but we just have to hope that obviously they're going to do what's best for their team, and then we're just going to hope that works the best for the Montreal Canadiens as well.
Exactly, and I'm just excited to see what happens, because honestly, even if this is a slight at Montreal, I kind of love the mind games, Jesse. I don't know about you. What you like this thing? I kind of hope Kent does kind of the same thing. No.
It's part of it, right? You got to do that, and that's why you can't really take anything at face value, because obviously there's so much research, there's so much time that goes into this, right? It's very, you got to keep these secrets very close to your chest, right? So I feel like we can't really read in too much who's having dinner with who, right? there's a lot of things to kind of throw off the other teams. You want to do what's best for your team, obviously, at the neglect of these other teams, right? So Don Waddell's going to do that, but you have to feel like there's a lot of stud defensemen. Obviously, we're in no control of what he does unless somehow we choose to move up, right? Which we can't rule out. We know it doesn't happen, loss, but if there is a year for the Habs to go up, they're hearing these rumors. Now is the time, even if we're able just to move up one spot, possibly, even though that would be a tough trade to do with Columbus. That's the difference between getting the player that we need.
That's a great point too. Like, what if he's saying this, making everyone think that he's going to pick someone like a Demidov or Lindstrom at 4, and if it's the guy the Habs want, you might be incentivized. Like, even if they had no plans of it, they just planned to take a defenseman anyway, they can entice maybe a mid-round pick or something decent to be prospect, I don't know, to move from 5th to 4th just so they can guarantee to get their guy. There's a lot of intricacies with this, but I'd love to hear from you guys down below. Is this Don Waddell missing with the Habs? Is it just him kind of talking nonchalantly about his season? I feel like these words were chosen pretty carefully, but hey, who knows? It could just be a one-off thing. We're not here to speculate on that stuff, but it's fun to think about anyway in the meantime. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. Leave your thoughts down below on all this crazy stuff. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.